Welcome, traveler. Today we embark on an epic journey through the Burning Crusade, the first great expansion of World of Warcraft. This is the story of a shattered world, a dark portal reopened, and heroes who dared to cross into the unknown. We'll uncover the truth behind Illidan Stormrage's rise, the desperate battle against the demonic Burning Legion, and the war that raged across the broken skies of Outland. From the tragic fall of Draenor to the struggle for its soul, this tale will take us beyond Azeroth, into realms twisted by magic and consumed by chaos. So if you love Warcraft lore and want to relive one of its most defining chapters, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and prepare yourself, because we're about to step beyond the dark portal. After the cataclysmic events of Warcraft 3, the Frozen Throne, Azeroth entered a fragile age of recovery. The Legion had been defeated at Mount Hyjal, and Archimonde, one of its mightiest commanders, was turned to dust. Yet even as the smoke cleared, the scars of war ran deep. Cities lay in ruins, kingdoms had fallen, and the world's defenders were left broken and weary. The fragile peace that followed was not born of trust or unity, but of exhaustion. The Alliance and Horde had fought side by side against annihilation, but old grudges do not die easily. As the years passed, the embers of war began to glow once again. The humans of Stormwind rebuilt their shining capital, eager to reclaim their influence across the Eastern Kingdoms. Under King Varian's absence and the regency of Bolvar Fordragon, the Alliance worked to restore order. The dwarves returned to their mountain halls, and the Night Elves withdrew to their sacred forests, guarding the remnants of Nordrassil, their world tree, now scarred and fading. On the other side of the Great Sea, the Horde, led by the young warchief Thrall, sought redemption. Orgrimmar rose from the deserts of Durotar, a new home for a people haunted by the sins of their past. Yet even as Thrall dreamed of honor and peace, shadows whispered across the land. Unseen by most, the Burning Legion had not truly been defeated. Its armies were endless, its masters immortal. The fall of Archimonde was merely a setback, not a victory. From the twisting nether, the great demon lord Kil'jaeden, the Deceiver, watched Azeroth closely. His rage burned not only for the humiliation of the Legion, but also for one particular betrayer, Illidan Stormrage. Once promised great power in exchange for his servitude, Illidan had failed to deliver victory at the Frozen Throne. His rebellion left Kil'jaeden furious, and the Deceiver vowed to make him suffer for his arrogance. It began with whispers, strange storms across the blasted lands, strange energies crackling around the ruins of the dark portal. Scholars and magi from both factions noticed it first, a pulse of fell magic, ancient and familiar. The air shimmered, and the stones of the portal, long dormant since the end of the Second War, began to hum with life once more. For decades it had stood as a tomb to the past, a monument to the war that had nearly destroyed two worlds. But now, the barrier between Azeroth and the sundered realm beyond was weakening. The Kirin Tor, the mages of Dalaran, dispatched scouts to investigate, fearing that the Legion was stirring once again. The Draenei prophet Velen felt it too, the same demonic signature that had once doomed his homeworld. And deep in Orgrimmar, Thrall listened to reports from his shaman, who spoke of dark visions of fire raining from the heavens and skies torn open by green flame. The omens were unmistakable. Something was awakening. In Stormwind, the call to arms was sounded once more. High Lord Bolvar and Lady Katrana Prestor, who was secretly the Black Dragon Onyxia, debated the threat, while the mage Khadgar, long thought lost beyond the dark portal, sent cryptic messages warning that Outland bleeds again. Those who remembered the First and Second Wars knew the name Outland well. It was the shattered remnant of Draenor, the Orcs' homeworld, destroyed when Ner'zhul, in a desperate bid for power, tore open too many portals and ripped his planet apart. Few believed anything could still survive there, but the rising demonic energy told another story. The world trembled as the dark portal roared back to life. From its green, swirling heart came not an invasion, not yet, but a wave of terror. The Legion's minions were stirring once more, and Azeroth stood at the edge of a new war. The Burning Crusade had begun, not with the march of armies, but with the echo of an ancient mistake repeating itself. In the chaos that followed, heroes gathered once again, veterans of Hyjal and young adventurers seeking glory. The Alliance and Horde, still divided, nonetheless recognized the threat. Expeditions were organized, armies assembled, and the call went out across the world. The Dark Portal had reopened. The Burning Legion was not gone, merely waiting beyond the veil. Through the red sands of the blasted lands, the two factions camped at the Portal-S base, uneasy allies in the face of the unknown. The silence of the structure was deceptive, its runes glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. No one knew what waited beyond, but all knew it had to be faced, for if the Legion's shadow was rising again, it would not stop with Outland. Azeroth itself would burn. And so the bravest warriors and magi of both sides prepared to step into legend once more, to cross into the broken world beyond the stars. They would find there not only enemies and monsters, but the truth of how this endless war began. The Dark Portal was open, and with it, destiny itself called. When the call went out across Azeroth that the Dark Portal had reopened, there was no hesitation, only resolve. Veterans who had fought in the old wars felt a chill in their hearts, remembering the nightmares that had once poured through that gateway. But this time it was different. This time the people of Azeroth would not wait for the demons to invade. They would take the fight to them. From the towering walls of Stormwind to the bustling streets of Orgrimmar, banners were raised and heroes were summoned. The Alliance formed the first expeditionary forces, commanded by the noble Turalion's old comrades, men and women who had once fought under the banner of the Sons of Lothar. The Horde, under Warchief Thrall, gathered warriors of every clan, from battle-hardened orc veterans to young trolls eager for glory. Both factions knew they were marching into the unknown, but both understood what was at stake, the very survival of their world. As dawn broke over the blasted lands, the air around the Dark Portal shimmered with unstable energy. A swirling maelstrom of green fire consumed the archway, crackling with the sound of screaming winds. One by one, the first soldiers stepped through and vanished. Those who followed spoke later of a sensation like falling through the void itself, their bodies stretched thin by magic older than the stars. And then suddenly there was light, red, burning light. The world on the other side was not a world at all, but a wound, Outland. Once the home of the Orcs and Draenei, now nothing more than a shattered husk floating in the endless twisting nether. Its skies burned with violet storms, its soil cracked and lifeless. Great fragments of rock drifted in the air, held together by unstable magic. The first sight that greeted the soldiers was the Hellfire Peninsula, a land where the ground itself bled molten fire. Jagged cliffs and ancient fortresses rose in the distance, their walls scarred by centuries of war. Immediately, both factions began their desperate fight for survival. On one side of the portal, the Alliance built Honor Hold, a fortress established by the descendants of those who had once followed General Turalyon through the first portal decades earlier. Against all odds, they had survived the destruction of Draenor and built a bastion of resistance in this alien hellscape. Now they welcomed the new arrivals as long-lost kin, ready to continue their eternal vigil against the Legion. On the other side of the blasted plain, the Horde claimed Thrallmar, a fortress raised under the watchful eye of Nazgul, one of Thrall's most trusted commanders. For the Orcs, returning to Outland was both a homecoming and a curse. Here lay the bones of their ancestors, and the ruins of their shame. The air reeked of fell corruption, a reminder of the demonic pact that had once enslaved their people. To many, stepping onto this broken world was like walking into a graveyard. But there was no time for reflection. The Burning Legion still reigned over Hellfire Peninsula. Massive fortresses, built by fell orcs under the rule of the Pit Lord Magtheridon, loomed across the landscape. His armies, a twisted fusion of demon and orc blood, patrolled the scorched plains, enslaving all who resisted. Fell Reavers, enormous mechanical titans powered by demonic energy, stomped across the wasteland, crushing anything in their path. The air itself seemed to burn with malice. The first battles of the Burning Crusade began almost immediately. Alliance knights clashed with corrupted orcs in the shadow of the portal, while Horde raiders stormed Legion outposts with brutal efficiency. The sky was lit with fire as infernals rained down like meteors. But slowly, inch by inch, the heroes of Azeroth carved a foothold into this nightmare realm. From Hellfire Peninsula, Expeditions began to spread outward, seeking answers and allies. To the west lay Zangarmarsh, a strange, dreamlike region where colossal mushrooms towered like trees, and the air was thick with mist. It was a place of eerie calm compared to the chaos of Hellfire, but danger still lurked beneath the waters. Here the Naga under Lady Vash had begun draining the marsh's life-giving reservoirs, channeling its energy towards some dark purpose. For those who had fought the Naga during the Third War, her presence confirmed the worst fears. Illidan's Stormrage was here, somewhere in this broken world, gathering power. As the factions spread out across Outland, they began to understand the magnitude of what had happened to this world. Mountains floated in the air, rivers ran backward into the void, gravity itself twisted unpredictably, and through it all, remnants of the old Draenor civilization could still be found. Crumbling temples, shattered roads, and haunted ruins echoing with the cries of spirits long dead. Both the Alliance and the Horde soon realized that survival in Outland meant more than defeating demons. They had to adapt, to build, to form uneasy alliances with whoever still lived. Broken Draenei, known as the Broken Ones, emerged from the wastes, twisted descendants of Velen-S people who had been left behind when Draenor was destroyed. They warned of darker powers rising, of ancient betrayals and forgotten wars that still shaped the land. In the heart of the Hellfire Peninsula, beneath the smoking skies, the forces of Azeroth began to dig in. They had crossed into another world, not just to fight the Legion, but to uncover the truth of their pasts, and perhaps to find redemption for them. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Outland was alive, and it was angry. The burning crusade had only just begun. Long before it became the shattered ruin known as Outland, this broken realm was once a thriving world called Draenor, a land of wild beauty and balance. Great mountains rose over emerald plains, forests teemed with life, and two proud races called it home, the noble Draenei. Followers of the Naru and the Light and the Orcish clans, children of the elements and guardians of their ancestral spirits. For generations, they lived apart, but in relative peace. The Draenei built crystalline temples and cities bathed in holy light, while the Orcs roamed the plains of Nagrand and the forests of Terokar, communing with their ancestors through shamanistic traditions. But peace on Draenor was fragile, and fate had other plans. When the Draenei fled their distant world of Argus, they were pursued by the Burning Legion, the endless army of demons seeking to destroy or corrupt all life. Kil'jaeden, the Deceiver, had once counted Velen, the Draenei prophet, as an ally before Velen rejected his pact with the Legion. For millennia, Kil'jaeden hunted him across the stars, burning world after world to ashes. And when he found Draenor, he saw an opportunity, not merely to destroy the Draenei, but to create a new weapon for the Legion. Kil'jaeden reached out to Ner'zhul'ta, the most respected shaman of the Orcs and the spiritual leader of the Frostwolf clan. Appearing to him in visions, the demon lord disguised himself as the spirit of Ner'zhul's deceased mate, Rulkan. Through this cruel deception, Kil'jaeden whispered poison into the old shaman's heart. He spoke of Draenei plots, of secret plans to enslave the Orcs, and of the need for unity against a false enemy. Ner'zhul, blinded by grief and faith, listened, and thus began the downfall of his people. At Kil'jaeden's command, Ner'zhul united the Orcish clans into a single horde, promising strength and glory. But the Deceiver wanted more. He instructed the Orcs to drink the blood of a powerful pit lord named Manaroth, a gift that would grant them unimaginable power. Ner'zhul hesitated, sensing the corruption behind the offer. But his ambitious apprentice, Gul'dan, did not. Eager for dominance, Gul'dan betrayed his master and led the Orcs in accepting the demonic pact. When the clans drank Manaroth's blood, the fell curse took hold instantly. Their eyes burned green, their skin darkened, and their souls were bound to the Burning Legion. From that moment, the Orcs were no longer servants of the elements. They were slaves to bloodlust. The Horde turned upon the Draenei with savage fury, burning their temples and slaughtering their people in a war that would last years. The radiant cities of Shattrath and Karabor, once sanctuaries of peace, were left in ruin. The Draenei were nearly wiped out, their survivors forced into hiding. And as Draenor bled, the orcs' lust for conquest grew. Under Gul'dan's shadowy leadership, they sought new worlds to destroy. It was then that Gul'dan was approached by another power, Medivh, the guardian of Tirisfal, who had been corrupted by the spirit of Sargeras. Medivh promised Gul'dan access to new lands rich for conquest, the world of Azeroth. In exchange, the warlock would aid in the opening of a great portal, a gateway between worlds. Gul'dan agreed, and under his command, the orcs constructed massive structures of stone and magic, channeling fell energy into a rift that would tear through reality itself. The dark portal was born, linking Draenor and Azeroth for the first time. What followed was the First War, the invasion of Azeroth by the Horde, and the eventual destruction of Stormwind. But victory turned to ruin. The Horde fractured under internal strife, and Draenor began to rot from within. By the time the Second War ended, Draenor was dying. The fell energies unleashed by Gul'dan's sorcery and the Legion's corruption had scarred the very fabric of the planet. The skies burned crimson, and the ground cracked open to reveal seas of molten fire. In desperation, the remaining orc warlocks turned to their old master, Ner'zhul, who sought to escape the dying world. No longer a pawn of Kil'jaeden, he became obsessed with power and survival. His plan was simple and catastrophic. Using the knowledge of Gul'dan's portal magic, Ner'zhul sought to open multiple gateways to other worlds. He believed that through these portals, he and his followers could flee Draenor's destruction. But each portal required unimaginable energy. As his warlocks performed the rituals, the strain tore at the planet's core. The skies screamed, mountains shattered, entire continents began to drift apart. Ner'zhul succeeded, for a moment. He opened his portals and fled into the void, but the cost was beyond reckoning. The unstable rifts collapsed in on themselves, unleashing forces that ripped Draenor apart. Oceans boiled away, the crust fractured, and the planet imploded. What remained was not a world, but fragments, floating shards suspended in the infinite expanse of the twisting nether. Draenor was gone. From its ashes emerged Outland, a shattered realm where gravity faltered, where time itself twisted, and where the screams of the dying still echoed through the void. Only a few survived the cataclysm, remnants of the orcish clans, the broken Draenei, and a handful of demons who refused to perish. The elemental spirits were silenced, their voices lost in the chaos, and the once proud world became a scar across the cosmos. For centuries, Outland drifted in shadow, forgotten by most. But its story was far from over. Amid the ruins, new powers began to rise. Warlords, monsters, and something far more dangerous, a night elf exile who would one day claim dominion over the broken world. Illidan Stormrage had found his new kingdom. Illidan Stormrage had always walked a path between light and darkness. To some, he was a hero, the one who wielded the power of the enemy to save his world. To others, he was a monster, a traitor who had sold his soul to chaos. But Illidan cared little for what others thought. His life had been shaped by exile, betrayal, and an unrelenting hunger for power. Not for domination's sake, but for freedom. Freedom from fate, from the chains of the Legion, and from the judgment of those who never understood him. After the events of Warcraft III, the Frozen Throne, Illidan's fate took a dark turn. Having failed to destroy the Lich King at Icecrown, and enraged Kil'jaeden in the process, he found himself hunted by the very Demon Lord who had once been his master. Kil'jaeden had given Illidan a task, to destroy the Frozen Throne and eliminate the Legion's rival, Ner'zhul. But Illidan's plans had crumbled in the bitter cold of Northrend, and the Deceiver's wrath was swift. In his fury, Kil'jaeden vowed that Illidan would suffer eternally for his defiance. Knowing the Legion would come for him, Illidan fled with his most loyal followers, the Naga, led by the cunning Lady Vashj, and the Blood Elves under the exiled Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider. Together, they escaped through a rift torn open by Illidan's magic, leaving Azeroth behind. Their destination was a world few remembered, a world torn apart by the very power Illidan sought to master, Outland. When Illidan first set foot on the shattered plains of Outland, he saw not a wasteland, but an opportunity. Here, in this broken and forgotten corner of the cosmos, he could build something new, a fortress, a realm, a weapon. The remnants of the Burning Legion still infested the land, led by the Pit Lord Kil'jaeden, who ruled from his black citadel deep within the Hellfire Peninsula. His fell orcs and demons enslaved what little life remained, twisting the land with rivers of green fire. To claim Outland, Illidan would first have to destroy the Legion's hold upon it. Illidan's forces struck swiftly and mercilessly. The Naga rose from the depths of Zangarmarsh, bringing with them the crushing strength of the sea. The Blood Elves, though weakened and desperate for magical sustenance, wielded their arcane power with deadly precision. And Illidan himself, half demon, half night elf, descended upon Magtheridon's legions like a storm. The battles were cataclysmic, shaking the very foundations of the broken world. The Fell Orcs fell by the thousands, and the Pit Lord's dominion began to crumble. At last, Illidan faced Magtheridon in the heart of his fortress. The Pit Lord's arrogance was legendary. He had once served as one of the Legion Maes' greatest generals, but Illidan was not a mortal creature to be underestimated. Fueled by fell energy and centuries of bitter purpose, the betrayer unleashed his full fury. The two titans clashed in a storm of green fire and shadow, and when the smoke cleared, Magtheridon lay defeated, chained beneath the ruins of his own citadel. With Magtheridon's fall, Illidan claimed Outland for himself. From that day forward, he ruled as the self-proclaimed Lord of Outland, a title both defiant and prophetic. He did not seek to conquer Azeroth or serve the Legion. He sought to prepare for the war that would one day decide the fate of all worlds. In his mind, the only way to defeat the Burning Legion was to outmatch it, to harness the same power that had enslaved countless civilizations. Lady Vashj served him with unwavering loyalty. Once a night elf herself, she saw in Illidan a reflection of her own exile, a being cast out by those too blind to understand necessity. Her Naga worked tirelessly to drain Outland's resources, redirecting its waters and magic toward Illidan's growing armies. Beneath the mushroom forests of Zangarmarsh, they built intricate networks of pipes and reservoirs, creating both weapons and fortifications. Kael'thas Sunstrider, the Prince of Kael'thas, was another broken soul drawn into Illidan's orbit. After the fall of his homeland and the near extinction of his people, Kael'thas had turned to Illidan out of desperation. The Blood Elves were addicted to magic. Their connection to the Sunwell had been severed, leaving them starved and fading. Illidan offered them what they needed most, a new source of power. To Kael'thas, Illidan was not a master, but a means to an end, a being who understood what it meant to be consumed by necessity. Together, the three exiles forged a fragile alliance bound by ambition and pain. Illidan ruled from the Black Temple, once the sacred Karabor of the Draenei, now a fortress of obsidian and shadow. From its heights, he watched the skies of Outland, ever vigilant for signs of Kil'jaeden's wrath. He knew the deceiver would never forgive him, and so he prepared for the inevitable confrontation. His armies grew, his influence spread, and across the shattered realms of Netherstorm and Shadowmoon, Illidan's name became legend, whispered in fear and reverence alike. To the outside world, Illidan Stormrage was a tyrant, another dark lord in a long line of monsters, but within his mind burned a conviction unshaken by judgment, that only he had the will to challenge the Legion on its own terms. He saw himself not as a destroyer, but as a savior the world would never understand. Yet even as he built his empire, cracks began to form. His allies had their own desires, their own loyalties, and their own doubts. Kael'thas's thirst for power deepened into obsession, and Vashj's Naga grew restless beneath the endless labor. Outland was his kingdom, yes, but it was a kingdom forged on fragile alliances and cursed ground, and in the endless void beyond the stars, Kil'jaeden was still watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back at his wayward creation. Illidan had claimed Outland as his refuge, but in truth it was a prison, one built by his own hand. When the first waves of Alliance and Horde soldiers stepped onto the scorched plains of Hellfire Peninsula, they quickly realized that surviving in Outland would demand more than courage. It would demand unity strategy and the will to adapt. The world they entered was in constant motion, its very air thick with feel energy, its skies torn by chaotic storms. Here the rules of Azeroth did not apply. Every breath was a reminder that this was a realm built on destruction, where even the ground trembled with lingering fury. Yet in this chaos, the armies of Azeroth began to carve out new homes, footholds of order in a land long lost to madness. The Kil'jaeden Alliance had established their first stronghold at Illidan, Honorhold, a fortress rising from the ashes of an older bastion once built by the sons of Lothar, the same heroes who had crossed into Draenor during the Second War. Miraculously, some of those soldiers, thought long dead, had survived the world's shattering. For decades they had endured the burning storms, holding the line against the Legion and the corrupted Orcs. When the new Alliance expedition arrived through the Dark Portal, they found their brothers still fighting, weathered and scarred, but unbroken. Honorhold became a beacon of determination. Its towers gleamed against the red haze of the sky, a symbol of the Alliance's refusal to yield to despair. Under the command of Zaj, Danath Trollbane, a veteran of the Old Wars, the soldiers reinforced the walls, secured supply lines, and launched daring raids against the demon outposts scattered across Hellfire Peninsula. To them, Outland was both a battlefield and a grave, a place to finish the fight their ancestors had begun. The Horde, meanwhile, established Thrallmar, a bastion of iron and willpower. Led by Nazgul, one of Thrall's most trusted advisors, the Orcs saw their return to Outland as deeply personal. For them, this was not merely another front in the Legion's war, it was a journey home. Here lay the remains of Draenor, the world of their ancestors, now scarred by the sins of their past. Many among the Horde viewed this expedition as a chance for redemption, to confront the demons who had once enslaved them, and to reclaim the honor their people had lost. Thrallmar rose quickly, built by Orcish hands that had once been shackled by fail chains. The banners of the Horde snapped in the burning wind as warriors prepared for endless battle. Together with the Tauren, Trolls and Forsaken, they launched assaults on fell Orc fortresses, determined to purge Magtheridon's remnants and any who still served the Legion. Across the wasteland, the sound of drums echoed, not of conquest, but of defiance. Between the Alliance and Horde, the uneasy truce of Azeroth held barely. Though they shared a common enemy in Illidan's forces and the Burning Legion, old rivalries simmered beneath the surface. Skirmishes broke out near supply routes, and spies traded whispers of treachery. Yet both sides knew that open war would only doom them all. Outland demanded cooperation, however reluctant, and for now they fought their enemies instead of each other. As the campaign deepened, new allies joined the struggle, races bound to Outland's history and Azeroth's fate. Among the Alliance, a new people emerged from the shadows of the past, the Draenei. Once thought extinct, these survivors of Draenor's cataclysm had lived in hiding for centuries, scattered across the shattered world. Their luminous eyes and crystalline architecture were remnants of a civilization that had once flourished under the light. Led by the wise prophet Velen, the Draenei had long awaited the day when they could stand against the Legion once more. To the Draenei, the arrival of the Alliance was a sign of destiny, a chance to unite their ancient struggle with the broader war for existence itself. They offered their knowledge of Outland, their mastery of the light, and their faith that even in ruin, redemption was possible. The Alliance, in turn, welcomed them with reverence. The Draenei's resilience, their deep spirituality, and their understanding of the Legion's ways made them invaluable allies in the dark days ahead. For the first time in millennia, the Children of the Light and the Sons of the Alliance fought side by side. Across the battlefield, another race had also found a new home, the Blood Elves. Once known as the High Elves of Kael'thas, their proud kingdom had been nearly destroyed during the Third War. The Scourge's invasion had left their cities in ruins, and their sacred Sunwell, the source of their magic, defiled. In desperation, Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider led his people down a dangerous path. Renaming themselves Sindore, or Children of the Blood, they sought new sources of arcane energy to sustain their addiction to magic. Kael'thas's followers on Azeroth, believing their prince was working for their salvation, joined the Boisejut, finding a strange kinship among its outcasts. The orcs, trolls, and Forsaken understood loss. They too were people reshaped by tragedy. Though mistrust lingered, the Horde welcomed the Blood Elves for their magical skill and unyielding determination. In the Crimson Halls of Silvermoon, a new alliance was born, one forged not in honor but in necessity. Thus, Outland became the stage for a new chapter in Azeroth's endless struggle. The alliance, guided by faith and memory, sought to finish a war that had begun generations earlier. The Horde, driven by redemption and survival, fought to reclaim the dignity their ancestors had lost. And within the fractured sky of this broken world, new allies brought with them the hope and danger of change. As Honorhold and Thrallmar grew, so too did their ambitions. Outland was no longer just a distant battlefield. It was the heart of a war that would shape the destiny of both factions. Yet somewhere in the shadows, beyond the reach of either army, Illidan Stormrage watched their progress from the spires of the Black Temple. He saw their courage, their pride, their endless struggle, and he smiled. They thought themselves liberators. But to Illidan, they were merely pieces on a far greater board, pawns in a war that only he truly understood. Even after the defeat of Magtheridon and Illidan's rise to power, the fires of the Burning Legion still burned across Outland. The Legion was like a disease. It could not truly die, only retreat and fester, waiting for the moment to strike again. Demons that had once served under Magtheridon scattered across the land, carving out citadels and fortresses amidst the chaos. Their corruption seeped into every crack of the broken world, poisoning the skies and twisting the very earth. For the heroes of Azeroth, who had come through the dark portal to cleanse Outland, the war was only beginning. The heart of this corruption pulsed within Hellfire Citadel, a monstrous fortress built upon the ruins of Magtheridon's former seat of power. Its jagged towers rose like blackened blades from the scorched ground, a monument to the Legion's cruelty. Even after Illidan claimed dominion over Outland, he had not fully purged Magtheridon's influence. He had instead imprisoned the Pit Lord deep within the citadel, using his demonic blood to fuel the creation of fell orcs. These creatures, once noble orcs from Outland's surviving clans, were twisted by feel energy until their skin burned red and their minds turned savage. They were the perfect soldiers, strong, relentless, and utterly without mercy. In the chaos that followed Illidan's conquest, many of these fell orcs escaped his control. Some remained loyal to Magtheridon, believing their fallen master would rise again. Others succumbed entirely to madness, spreading across Hellfire Peninsula like wildfire. Their warbands clashed constantly, with Illidan's Naga and Blood Elf sentinels, with the Burning Legion's demons, and with the invading armies of Azeroth. The entire region became a living battlefield, where rivers of fire met oceans of blood. It was here, on these cursed plains, that the combined might of the Alliance and Horde began their first great campaign in Outland. Both factions knew that the corruption of Hellfire Citadel could not be allowed to continue. If the demons were not destroyed, their poison would spread to every corner of the shattered world, and eventually, through the dark portal, back to Azeroth itself. The battles for Hellfire were unlike any fought before. The skies burned green as infernals rained down like meteors, smashing into the earth with explosions that could level entire battalions. Fell Reavers, enormous war machines built by demonic engineers, thundered across the fields, crushing soldiers beneath their colossal feet. The Alliance, striking from Honorhold, launched disciplined assaults with siege engines and griffin riders, their paladins shining like beacons against the darkness. The Horde, marching from Thrallmar, met the fell orcs in brutal close combat, their shamans calling upon the few remaining elemental spirits willing to answer. Each victory was bought with blood. Weeks of relentless fighting pushed the combined forces deeper into the citadel, through corridors reeking of brimstone and death. There they encountered horrors beyond imagination, chambers filled with vats of fell blood, where Magtheridon's essence was siphoned to create new generations of corrupted warriors. The very walls pulsed as if alive, veins of green fire twisting through black stone. At the heart of the fortress lay the Pit Lord himself, Magtheridon. The fallen commander of the Burning Legion, bound by runes and chains forged in shadow. His body was vast, his eyes glowing with infernal hatred. Though weakened, he was far from powerless. As the heroes of Azeroth stormed his chamber, Magtheridon roared in fury, vowing that even in defeat the Legion would never fall. The battle that followed shook the citadel to its core. The ground split, fire cascaded from the ceilings, and Magtheridon's chains trembled as he unleashed his wrath. But even a Pit Lord's strength could not overcome the determination of two worlds united by purpose. With blades of steel, spells of light, and the fury of countless souls lost to the Legion's cruelty, the heroes brought Magtheridon to his knees. When the final blow fell, his dying roar echoed across the wasteland, a sound both terrifying and liberating. With his death, the immediate threat of the Legion's resurgence in Hellfire was broken. The fell forges dimmed, the skies cleared slightly, and the demonic warbands scattered into the wilds. For the first time, the armies of Azeroth could breathe, but not rest. The victory at Hellfire Citadel was only a single battle in a much larger war. Outland was vast, and its corruption ran deep. Yet the fall of Magtheridon revealed more than anyone expected. When his blood cooled and his chains lay shattered, the truth came to light. Illidan Stormrage had used the Pit Lord's power to strengthen his own army. The Fell Orcs, the demons, even the flow of magic across Outland had all been manipulated by the betrayer's hand. Illidan's war against the Legion was real, but his methods were monstrous. To many in the Alliance and Horde, this revelation blurred the line between savior and tyrant. Was Illidan truly fighting to destroy the Legion, or was he simply building his own demonic empire? As the smoke of battle drifted over the Hellfire Peninsula, that question lingered unanswered. The heroes had triumphed, but at a cost that left them uneasy. They had slain one monster, only to reveal another waiting in the shadows. From his black citadel in Shadowmoon Valley, Illidan watched the flames rise and smiled coldly. The armies of Azeroth were strong, stronger than he expected, and soon they would come for him. But Illidan was no fool. He had seen the Legion's true face, its infinite reach. He knew that the fight for Outland was merely a prelude to something far greater. While the Alliance and Horde celebrated their victory, Illidan prepared for the next move in his secret war. And as the embers of Hellfire Citadel smoldered in the distance, the land itself seemed to whisper of what was still to come. A war not just for Outland, but for the soul of every world the Legion had ever touched. Beyond the scorched wastelands of Hellfire Peninsula, where fire and ash consumed the sky, there existed another face of Outland, one that felt almost alive. Traveling west, the air grew thick and humid. The color of the sky deepened to a strange, perpetual twilight, and colossal mushrooms towered over the landscape like ancient guardians. This was Zangarmarsh, a place of mist, mystery, and quiet menace. Here the ground pulsed with strange bioluminescent life. Pools of glowing water reflected the pale blue of the fungal canopies, and creatures unknown to Azeroth slithered through the murk. Giant spore bats glided silently overhead, while bog giants lumbered through the marshes, their bodies seemingly carved from mud and moss. To those who first set foot in this place, Zangarmarsh felt like a dream, serene on the surface, but hiding something deeply wrong beneath. The first explorers noticed it immediately. The waters of Zangarmarsh were receding. Great lakes that once nourished the land had begun to dry up, leaving behind cracked earth and withered roots. The marsh's strange balance, delicate and ancient, was collapsing, and it didn't take long to discover why. In the heart of the region, deep beneath the mists, the Naga had returned, led by the cunning and ruthless Lady Vashj, the Serpent Queen who once served Illidan Stormrage in the war against Arthas. The Naga had transformed vast portions of Zangarmarsh into an industrial nightmare. Massive, whirring pumps rose from the swamps, built of metal and powered by fell energy, draining the region's lakes to feed Illidan's growing dominion. The Naga worked tirelessly, channeling the stolen waters into enormous reservoirs beneath Serpent Shrine Cavern, their fortress beneath the surface. To the Naga, this was not simple resource gathering, it was control. Vashj understood that water was life, and by draining it, she could choke the land and dominate all who depended on it. She ruled her domain with cold precision, her every move motivated by loyalty to Illidan and by a hunger for vengeance against the world that had rejected her kind. Long ago, before her transformation, Lady Vashji had been a highborn night elf, one of Queen Ashara's most devoted handmaidens. When the Well of Eternity imploded during the War of the Ancients, she and her people were dragged into the depths, twisted by the dark magic of the old gods into serpentine monstrosities, the Naga. Even in her monstrous form, Vashj retained her beauty, her intelligence, and her cunning. To her, Illidan represented not just power, but purpose. He had given her people a new destiny, one that might finally restore their ancient glory. But the draining of Zangarmarsh had consequences beyond Vashj's ambitions. The native creatures began to die. The broken, descendants of the Draenei who had survived Draenor's shattering, watched their home wither away and cried out for help. They knew the Marsh's balance was sacred, its waters connected to the veins of the world itself. Without them, Outland's fragile ecosystem would collapse completely. When word reached Honorhold and Thrallmar, the heroes of Azeroth set out to investigate. Both factions sent scouts and soldiers into the foggy wetlands, building small outposts on its edges, Tel Ridor for the Draenei and Zabrajin for the Trolls. These settlements became bastions of resistance, launching missions to disrupt the Naga ES pumping stations and uncover the truth of Vashji ES schemes. The battles in Zangarmarsh were unlike those fought in Hellfire. Instead of fiery sieges, this was a war of shadows, ambushes in the mist, silent raids against Naga machinery, and desperate struggles in flooded caverns. The Naga fought with a terrible grace, their movements fluid and deadly. Giant myrmidons guarded the pumps while hydras patrolled the waterways. Each skirmish revealed more of Vashj's influence and more of Illidan's reach. Eventually, the trail led the heroes deep beneath the waters into Serpent Shrine Cavern, Vashj's throne of corruption. There, beneath the endless waves, they found a realm both beautiful and terrifying. Towers of coral and bone twisted together, glowing with fell green light. Massive conduits pulsed with stolen energy, and all around, the sound of rushing water echoed like a heartbeat. Lady Vashj awaited them at the heart of her sanctum, seated upon a throne of shells and shadows. Her presence was commanding, a creature of both regal poise and monstrous power. With 6 arms, each bearing a weapon or relic, she faced the invaders with a cold smile. To her, they were intruders in a world she had helped to shape. Her words were dripping with venom and pride. She spoke of Illidan's grand design, a plan to harness Outland's energies, to defy the Burning Legion itself. To her, the draining of the marsh was a necessary sacrifice, a step toward freedom from the demons that had once enslaved the Night Elves and now sought to enslave all worlds. But even as she spoke of loyalty, there was something darker in her tone, a hunger for dominion that went beyond even Illidan's ambition. The battle that followed was as fierce as any fought in Outland. Vashj commanded the waters themselves, summoning tidal surges and whirlpools, her magic warping the very air. The heroes of Azeroth fought through waves of Naga, coiling serpents, and living currents of electricity. As the battle reached its peak, Vashj unleashed her fury, a storm of lightning and venom that shook the cavern to its foundations. But in the end, even she could not withstand the will of those who had come to end her reign. When Lady Vashj fell, the waters that had been stolen from the marsh began to flow freely once more. The pumps faltered and died, and Zangarmarsh slowly began to breathe again. Her final words, whispered through cracked fangs, were not of defeat but of devotion. For Illidan, I have done all that was asked. Even in death, her loyalty remained unbroken. With Vashj's fall, a great threat to Outland's balance was ended, but her death left new questions. What exactly was Illidan building with all this stolen power? What kind of war was he preparing for, and who was he truly fighting? As the mists of Zangarmarsh settled once more, the answer seemed to lie further south, where shadows gathered in the dark valleys of Shadowmoon. Above the desolate plains of Outland, far beyond the mists of Zangarmarsh and the scorched horizons of Hellfire Peninsula, there was a realm where the laws of nature no longer applied. Mountains floated weightless in the void, storms of raw arcane energy tore the sky apart, and rivers of lightning flowed through the shattered air. This was Netherstorm, a region caught between worlds, a scar left behind when Draenor had been torn asunder. It was a place where time and space bled together, and where those who sought to control the arcane could either master it or be consumed by it. Here the Blood Elves of Outland had made their home, and, led by Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider, once the noble heir to Kael'thas, they had followed Illidan Stormrage into exile after the Third War. For a time they believed Illidan would be their salvation, a being powerful enough to free them from their addiction to magic and protect them from the Burning Legion. But as the years passed, something within Kael'thas began to fracture. The prince who had once fought for his people's survival was slowly replaced by something darker, something desperate. In Netherstorm, Kael'thas built a new kingdom of floating citadels and arcane laboratories, with Tempest Keep at its heart. This fortress, a relic of the mysterious Naru, had been seized by his forces and repurposed into a stronghold of pure magic. Within its crystalline halls, Kael'thas and his followers harnessed the storm's chaotic energies, drawing power from the raw essence of the Nether itself. It was a dangerous endeavor, and one that came at a heavy cost. Many of his people perished in the process, their bodies unable to contain the power they sought to control. The Blood Elves had come to Outland to find hope, but instead they found addiction in its purest form. The arcane energies of the Netherstorm were intoxicating, overwhelming, and impossible to resist. Kael'thas, ever proud and ambitious, convinced himself that only by mastering these forces could he save his people. But in truth, he was falling into the same trap that had doomed his ancestors, the lure of forbidden power. Meanwhile, Illidan had grown distant. From his fortress in Shadowmoon Valley, he waged his private war against the Burning Legion, his every move shrouded in secrecy. He demanded obedience but offered little explanation. Kael'thas, once his most trusted lieutenant, began to feel abandoned, used. Doubt turned to resentment, and resentment to treachery. In the skies above Netherstorm, the Ethereum's ghostly remnants of the ethereal race drifted through the void. These beings, consumed by their obsession with power, mirrored Kael'thas's descent perfectly, hollow, brilliant, and broken. He saw in them what he feared most, a reflection of what the Sin Dore could become if their hunger was never sated. Yet instead of turning back, he delved deeper into the abyss. It was then that Kil'jaeden and the Deceiver himself returned to whisper in Kael'thas's mind. The Demon Lord had long sought a way to re-enter the mortal realm after Illidan's defiance. Now, through Kael'thas's pride and desperation, he found his opening. Kil'jaeden promised what Illidan could not: unlimited power, the salvation of the Blood Elves, and the restoration of their beloved Sunwell. To a prince burdened by guilt and betrayal, those promises were irresistible. Kael'thas turned on his former master. He began siphoning not only the magic of the Netherstorm, but also the energies of Tempest Keep itself, twisting them into a weapon that could tear open a new gateway for the Burning Legion. His followers, once loyal to the dream of a reborn Kael'thas, were divided. Some remained faithful while others succumbed to madness. Those who resisted were executed or imprisoned, branded as traitors. When the heroes of Azeroth arrived in Netherstorm, they found not a kingdom, but a graveyard of shattered dreams. The skies above were scarred by lightning, the land broken by unstable mana storms. Floating islands drifted aimlessly, tethered by chains of pure energy. At the center of it all loomed the Eye, Kael'thas's seat of power within Tempest Keep, a place of elegance and horror, where the prince had become a god to his followers and a puppet to his new master. Inside those crystal halls, Kael'thas awaited the inevitable confrontation. His once golden hair had turned pale, his eyes burned with feel fire, and his voice, once calm and noble, now carried the echo of madness. When the champions of Azeroth faced him, he greeted them not with anger but with pity, as though they were too blind to see the truth. He spoke of destiny, of rebirth, and of the great work he was doing in Kil'jaeden's name. To him, betrayal was no sin, it was evolution. The battle that followed was one of the most extraordinary in Outland's history. Kael'thas commanded the very elements of magic itself, fire, frost, and arcane energy, bending to his will. His loyal guardians fought beside him, Thaladred the Darkener, Capernian, Sanguinar, and Telonicus. each a master of a different school of power, each willing to die for their prince. Yet in the end, even their might could not protect him from the combined strength of the heroes who had come to stop him. As Kael'thas fell, his final words were not those of regret, but of prophecy. He spoke of a return, of the Sunwell reignited, of Kil'jaeden's coming, and of his own rebirth. Few understood what he meant at the time, but his death in Tempest Keep was not the end. In secret, Kael'thas survived, carried away by his most loyal followers to continue his dark purpose. Meanwhile, in the Shadowmoon Valley, Illidan's own fortress with the Mahai Black Temple stood as a beacon of power and defiance. From its obsidian walls, he watched as his empire began to fracture. Kael'thas had betrayed him. Vashj was dead. The Legion still lingered. His vision of uniting Outland under his rule to strike back at Kil'jaeden was crumbling, and in the distance, across the void, the deceiver's laughter echoed, for his snare had been set. The stage was now prepared for the final act, the corruption of the Sunwell, the rebirth of Kael'thas, and Kil'jaeden's return to Azeroth. The Burning Crusade was no longer just a war for Outland. It was a battle for the soul of all creation. Amid the chaos of Outland, between the burning skies of Hellfire, the endless storms of Netherstorm, and the mists of Zangarmarsh, there stood a single city that seemed untouched by madness, a sanctuary floating above the wastes, shimmering with golden light and sacred purpose. This was a Shattrath city, the heart of the Draenei civilization reborn, and the last true bastion of peace in a world consumed by war. The story of Shattrath began long before the heroes of Azeroth arrived. Once it had been the radiant capital of the Draenei, a city of crystalline spires and divine harmony where the followers of the prophet Bai, Velen, communed with the light. But during the Orcish wars that devastated Draenor, Shattrath fell. The Orc clans, driven by the bloodlust of the Burning Legion, stormed its walls and slaughtered its people. Only a few Draenei survived, those who hid among the ruins and those blessed with the gift of the Naru, and celestial beings of pure light who would one day return to restore the city's spirit. That promise was fulfilled generations later when the Naru's Erdal descended upon the ruins. His presence radiated calm and renewal, and his light spread through the shattered stones, rekindling the heart of the city. From that moment, Shattrath became more than a city. It became a symbol, a place where the light shone brightest amid the shadows of despair. When the first forces of the Sindu Alliance and Antun arrived in Outland, they found in Shattrath something they had not expected: welcome. There were no walls raised against them, no guards barring their way. Instead, both factions were invited to lay down their conflicts and unite under a single banner, the banner of the Oshatar, the born from light. The Naru's emissaries spoke not of conquest or vengeance, but of purpose. Outland was dying, they said, but its fate was not yet sealed. Together, Azeroth's champions could restore balance and strike at the true enemy, the Burning Legion itself. Yet even in this place of hope, division lingered. Within Shattrath, two powerful orders had arisen, the Aldor and the Scryers, sworn rivals bound together by circumstance. The Aldor, composed mainly of Draenei priests and vindicators, were the ancient keepers of the light, loyal to the Naru and to the ways of Velen. They saw the coming of the Azerothian heroes as a divine sign, proof that the light ES influence still guided the universe. Their leader, High Priestess Ishana, was a figure of wisdom and compassion, yet beneath her calm exterior lay a quiet distrust of outsiders, especially those touched by fell magic. Opposing them stood the Scryers, a faction of blood elves who had defected from Kael'thas's forces in Netherstorm. Led by the Magister Houghton Vorenthal the Seer, they claimed to have heard Apodali's voice calling them away from the darkness of their prince's betrayal. Though once servants of Illidan and Kael'thas, they now sought redemption and protection from the corruption that still pulsed within their veins. To the Aldor, they were heretics and deceivers. To the Scryers, the Aldor were blind zealots clinging to ancient ways. Shattrath thus became a city of paradoxes, a place of peace built on a foundation of tension. Yet it worked. Somehow, despite the quiet rivalries and whispered accusations, Both factions coexisted under the light of Adal. Each contributed to the greater cause, the war against the Legion and the restoration of Outland. For the heroes who came from Azeroth, Shattrath was transformative. After the chaos of the Blasted Lands and the horrors of Hellfire, the city offered purpose, a direction. Here, warriors, mages, and adventurers from both factions walked side by side, laying aside the endless feud between Horde and Alliance to answer a higher calling. The Naru's light touched everyone differently. Some found faith where there had been none, others found forgiveness, and a few for the first time found peace. The central chamber of Shattrath, known as the Terrace of Light, was unlike anything seen on Azeroth. Adal floated serenely in the center, his crystalline form radiating warmth that soothed even the most battle-hardened hearts. Around him, Draenei and Blood Elves, Orcs and humans all knelt as equals, not as enemies but as seekers of purpose. When Adal spoke, it was not in words but in emotion, a pulse of light and sound that carried understanding directly to the soul. It was here that many of Azeroth's champions received their greatest missions, the call to strike at the Legion's heart, to end the corruption of Illidan, to confront Kael'thas' treachery, and to bring hope to a world that had long forgotten it. Shattrath became the staging ground for every major campaign in Outland. Its portals connected to every region, and its emissaries coordinated alliances that spanned races, beliefs, and worlds. But Adal's light did more than inspire. It revealed. Those who lingered in Shattrath too long often found themselves facing truths they had long ignored. Some came to understand the futility of endless war. Others, exposed to the purity of the light, were driven mad by their own guilt. The Naru's radiance was not gentle, it was absolute, and in that brilliance there was no room for deceit. Despite the unity Shattrath represented, its peace was fragile. The Aldor and Skryre rivalry occasionally flared into open conflict, and whispers persisted that Adal's patience had limits. Yet the city endured, because it had to. It was the last light in a world of shadow, and every soldier who passed through its gates left carrying a fragment of that light within them. From the towering spires of the Terrace of Light to the quiet libraries of the Aldor Rise and the gleaming towers of the Skryres, Shattrath stood as a reminder that Outland's fate was not yet sealed. Hope still lived here, burning brightly in defiance of the void, and beyond its golden walls the storm gathered once more. In the dark reaches of Shadowmoon Valley, Illidan Stormrage watched the city's glow from afar. To him, it was a beacon, not of hope, but of interference. While the Naru preached unity, he prepared for war, and soon their lights would clash in the shadow of the Black Temple. The road to the Black Temple was carved in blood. For months, the armies of Azeroth had battled across Outland, through fire, storm, and shadow, all leading to this final fortress, the seat of Illidan Stormrage's power. From the plains of Shadowmoon Valley, the temple rose like a jagged crown of obsidian, its spires reaching into a sky perpetually lit by emerald lightning. It was not just a fortress, it was a monument to defiance, a declaration of war against both the Burning Legion and the universe itself. For Illidan, this had been the culmination of everything he had fought for since his exile. Once the betrayer, then the savior, and now the so-called Lord of Outland, he had gathered armies of demons, blood elves, and Naga to his cause. He believed himself the only being willing, or able, to stand against the Legion's endless crusade. But as the heroes of Azeroth and the combined forces of the Shar-Tar and Aldor marched upon his gates, that grand vision began to crumble. Inside the temple, Akama, leader of the broken Draenei, wrestled with the weight of his own sins. Once a devout servant of the light, he had allied with Illidan in desperation, hoping to free his people from demonic slavery. But Illidan had betrayed that hope, enslaving Akama's brethren and twisting their sacred temple into a fortress of darkness. Now, with the armies of Azeroth approaching, Akama saw his chance for redemption and vengeance. Secretly, he joined forces with Maiev Shadowsong, the relentless Night Elf Warden who had hunted Illidan across worlds. Together, they plotted to end the betrayer's reign. The assault began with thunder. From the skies above Shadowmoon Valley, Griffin riders and wyverns clashed with Illidan's fel-infused sentinels. On the ground, Soldiers of both Horde and Alliance stormed the gates, their banners soaked in rain and ash. The Po-Ashtung Deathsworn. Akama's rebel faction led the charge through the lower temple, cutting down Illidan's demonic lieutenants one by one. Every corridor was a battlefield, every step a test of faith. The defenders of the Black Temple were as formidable as any seen in Outland. Demons, fell orcs, corrupted Draenei, and Illidan's most loyal generals fought with fanatic devotion. Among them stood Jai Supremus, a towering molten giant who guarded the temple's entrance. Teron Gorefiend, the first of the Death Knights, and Mother Shahraz, a demon matron whose gaze alone could shatter minds. One by one, these champions fell to the combined might of the invaders. The deeper the heroes pushed, the more the temple itself seemed to resist, its walls pulsing with feel energy, as if alive with Illidan's will. At the heart of the fortress, in the shattered chamber once dedicated to the light, Illidan waited. His twin warglaives gleamed in the green glow of the fell crystals that lined the walls, and his wings, black as the void, spread wide in defiance. Around him stood the remnants of his forces, exhausted but unwavering. To them, Illidan was not a tyrant. He was a god, the one who had dared to challenge the Legion and live, the one who had given purpose to the broken, the exiled, and the damned. When Akama entered the chamber, Illidan's voice was cold and calm, tinged with disappointment. "You would betray me, priest, after all I have given you?" he asked, his eyes burning with both fury and sorrow. Akama said nothing. Words were meaningless now. Their battle was swift and bitter, the culmination of years of manipulation and regret. When it was over, Illidan lay wounded, but not defeated. He retreated deeper into the temple, into the sanctum where his destiny awaited. There, beneath the open sky of Shadowmoon, Maiev Shadowsong appeared, the hunter at last standing before her prey. For years, she had lived for this moment. Illidan had destroyed her life, her people, her purpose. Yet as they faced one another, there was something almost mournful in her eyes. "It ends now," she said, her voice trembling not with anger but with conviction. Illidan smiled faintly. "You are not prepared," he whispered, a final echo of arrogance or perhaps a warning. Their duel was a dance of shadow and fury. Maiev moved with the precision of vengeance incarnate, her blades clashing against Illidan's warglaives in showers of sparks. Around them the temple trembled, its foundations cracking beneath the weight of their hatred. Illidan fought like a storm unleashed, every strike driven by the belief that he was the only one who truly understood the enemy they all faced. But even the most powerful demon hunter cannot fight destiny forever. When the final blow fell, it was not with triumph but tragedy. Illidan collapsed to his knees, his wings tattered, his body broken. Maiev approached, her breathing ragged, and for a moment the years of pursuit seemed meaningless. "It is finished," she said, her voice hollow. "At last, justice is done." But Illidan only looked up at her, his faint smile returning. "Is it, Maiev?" he asked softly. "The Legion still comes." Those were his final words. When he fell, silence swept through the temple. A silence so profound it felt as though the entire world had stopped to listen. Outside, the storms of Shadowmoon began to fade, and for the first time in centuries, faint light touched the black stones of the temple. Akama stood over the fallen betrayer, neither victorious nor vengeful. He had won his freedom, but it came at a cost he could scarcely bear. With solemn reverence, he reclaimed the Black Temple in the name of the Draenei, vowing to restore it as a sanctuary of the light. Maiev, meanwhile, lingered only long enough to see Illidan's body carried away. Her life's purpose was fulfilled, yet she felt nothing but emptiness. Illidan Stormrage, the betrayer, the Lord of Outland, the self-proclaimed savior of the worlds, was gone. But his death left behind a question that echoed across time. Had he truly been the villain everyone believed him to be, or the only one who had seen what was coming? For in the depths of the twisting nether, the burning legion stirred once more. And though Illidan's body lay cold in the Black Temple, his war and his purpose were far from over. The fall of Illidan Stormrage sent shockwaves across Outland. The once united armies that had marched under his banner scattered into chaos, their master slain and their purpose lost. For the first time in decades, the skies above Shadowmoon Valley cleared, revealing the shattered stars beyond the twisting nether. The Black Temple, a symbol of fear and dominance, now stood silent, reclaimed by Akama and his Ashtung followers. Yet even in triumph, a strange unease lingered. The war for Outland was not truly over. The heroes of Azeroth, weary but unbroken, began the long process of rebuilding. The Horde and Alliance each established their footholds more firmly, transforming war camps into settlements and trade routes. Outland, fractured and dying, began to breathe again, though its skies still glowed with fell fire, and its lands still bore the scars of demonic corruption. The shattered world could never truly heal, but life, stubborn, resilient life, had returned. In Shattrath City, the Naaru watched in silence. The great crystalline beings of light, led by Adal, had guided the mortal races throughout the campaign, offering both sanctuary and purpose. Now, as the echoes of battle faded, they sensed the stirrings of something far more dangerous. Illidan's defeat had not ended the Legion's reach. It had only removed a rogue piece from the board. In the void left by his death, darker forces began to move. Among them was one Kael'thas Sunstrider. Once the proud prince of Kael'thas and a loyal ally to Illidan, Kael'thas had fallen into madness long before the Black Temple's siege. His lust for power and desperation to save his people had driven him into the Legion's grasp. Even after his betrayal of Illidan and his near destruction in Netherstorm, Kael'thas refused to die. Broken in body but not in ambition, he retreated to Gismerk Magister's terrace. On the Isle of Quel'Danas, far from the war-torn lands of Outland, there he began to weave a new and terrible plan, one that would bring ruin not just to his enemies, but to all of Azeroth. In his isolation, Kael'thas forged a new alliance, not with mortals, but with the very being Illidan had once defied. Kil'jaeden the Deceiver, one of the mightiest commanders of the Burning Legion. To the Demon Lord, the death of Illidan was not a setback, but an opportunity. Illidan's war in Outland had distracted countless heroes and armies, drawing their attention away from the true objective, Azeroth itself. Now, with the betrayer gone, Kil'jaeden could move his pieces freely. His gaze fell upon the Bat Sunwell, the sacred font of arcane power once belonging to the High Elves, and long believed destroyed. The Sunwell, though extinguished years before, still pulsed faintly with residual magic, a spark of unimaginable potential. Kael'thas, claiming to seek salvation for his people, promised to reignite it. In truth, he meant to use the Sunwell as a gateway, a bridge through which Kil'jaeden could enter the mortal world. The very essence that had once nourished the Blood Elves, civilization would now be twisted into a portal for the Legion's rebirth. Back in Outland, the signs of this coming doom began to manifest. Fell energy surged unpredictably, demons reappeared in greater numbers, and whispers of Kael'thas' survival spread through the ranks of both factions. Many dismissed these rumors as the ravings of madmen. After all, the prince had been slain, but those who had seen the Legion's handiwork before knew better. Evil, once invited, never truly leaves. The shattered remnants of Illidan's army struggled to find purpose in this new world. The Naga, now leaderless, slithered back into the depths of Zangarmarsh and the watery ruins they once controlled. The Fell Orcs of Hellfire Citadel turned upon one another, consumed by bloodlust without Magtheridon or Illidan to command them. Outland became a land of ghosts, haunted by the echoes of wars that never truly ended. Akama and his followers sought to purify the Black Temple to restore it as a place of peace. The Draenei believed that perhaps the temple could serve as a beacon of light in a world scarred by shadow. But deep beneath the sanctum, whispers persisted, echoes of Illidan's final words, carried on the winds that howled through the nether. Even in death, his presence lingered, as if his soul refused to rest. Some claimed to see flickers of his form in the fell storms above the temple, watching, waiting. The Horde and Alliance, though victorious, found their uneasy truce strained. The war in Outland had given both factions a taste of unity, but also a reminder of their differences. The Blood Elves, led by Regent Lord Lorthamar Theronti, faced the shame of Kael'thas' betrayal. His descent into madness cast a long shadow over their newly forged alliance with the Horde. Meanwhile, the Draenei of the Alliance looked toward the skies, guided by the Naaru, preparing for a conflict far greater than any they had faced. The Burning Legion had not been defeated. It had only been delayed. The Deceiver now worked in secret, shaping Kael'thas into his chosen pawn. And on Azeroth, far from the ruins of Outland, the first tremors of that new invasion began to stir. In the halls of Silvermoon, strange energies began to gather. The air shimmered with heat and dread as the Sunwell's dormant magic awoke once more. Few understood the true danger. Fewer still realized that the battle for Outland had merely been a prelude. For while heroes celebrated their victory and kingdoms rebuilt, the real war, the war for the very soul of Azeroth, was about to begin. Kil'jaeden's shadow stretched across the stars, reaching toward the fragile world that had defied him for so long. And in that gathering darkness, one truth became clear: the Burning Crusade was far from over. The Burning Crusade marked more than a war. It was a revelation. When the Dark Portal reopened, heroes of Azeroth believed they were simply marching into another campaign, another battlefield against the Legion's familiar horrors. But what they found beyond that gateway changed everything. Outland was not just a world to be conquered or saved. It was a broken mirror reflecting the consequences of unchecked power, divine ambition, and eternal war. It forced Azeroth's champions to confront a truth far greater than themselves, that their world was but one of countless others in a vast interconnected cosmos, all caught in the same endless struggle between light and shadow. When Illidan's Stormrage fell, so too did the illusion of simplicity. He was the perfect symbol of what the Burning Crusade truly represented, a story without pure heroes or absolute villains. His defiance against the Legion was born not of righteousness, but desperation. His cruelty was a weapon forged from fear and pain. To some, he was a monster. To others, the only being who dared to fight evil on its own terms. His death left the universe quieter, but also emptier, as if a storm had passed, leaving a silence too deep to fill. And in that silence, the mortals of Azeroth began to realize that they stood on the edge of something much larger than a single war. The legacy of this campaign extended far beyond Outland's shattered skies. For the Horde and Alliance, it was a trial of identity. The Horde, now bound to the Blood Elves and their dark past, faced questions of loyalty and redemption. Could they truly trust those who had once served the Legion? The Alliance, strengthened by the arrival of the Draenei, a people older and wiser than any on Azeroth, began to see their struggle against the Legion not as a mortal conflict, but as a divine calling. The two factions, though united in purpose, emerged more divided in spirit than ever before. The seeds of future wars were sown in the very soil where they had stood together. Yet amidst these fractures there was also growth. The Draenei brought the wisdom of the Naaru, teaching mortals that the light was not just faith, but balance, a harmony that even demons could not fully destroy. The Blood Elves, in turn, brought with them the lesson of survival, that power once tainted could still be reclaimed. Together, these two races embodied the theme of the Burning Crusade itself, the eternal tension between redemption and corruption, between what one was and what one could become. Outland, though forever scarred, became a bridge between worlds. The shattered remnants of Draenor were now home to soldiers, pilgrims, and wanderers from across Azeroth. Shattrath City stood as a testament to unity, a fragile peace brokered between faiths and ideologies that had once sought to annihilate each other. It was there, beneath the radiant core of Adal, that many first began to understand that the true war was not fought only with swords or spells, but with choices. Every victory carried the weight of its own corruption, every act of mercy the shadow of consequence. But the victory over Illidan and the Burning Legion's forces was not an ending. It was a beginning, the first step into a universe of cosmic conflict that stretched far beyond the stars. The Legion was not gone, it was merely retreating, regrouping, adapting. Kil'jaeden's attempted invasion through the Sunwell had proven that even in defeat, the demon's influence could reach across worlds. And as Azeroth's heroes returned home, weary yet hardened, they carried with them the knowledge that their struggle had only just begun. The Burning Crusade also reshaped how mortals saw the gods they followed. The Naru, once seen as beings of pure light, revealed the complexity of their existence, that even light casts shadows, and that order can breed just as much destruction as chaos. The people of Azeroth learned that salvation and damnation often walk side by side. It was a lesson they would need to remember, for darker days lay ahead. In many ways, the Burning Crusade was the first time Azeroth truly looked outward, beyond its seas, beyond its continents, into the infinite tapestry of creation. It was a story that expanded not just the map, but the imagination. It connected worlds long thought lost, resurrected ancient legacies, and redefined the very scale of war. It transformed the Warcraft universe from a story of kingdoms and clans into one of stars and eternity. And though the fires of Outland began to fade, their light illuminated the path to the next chapter, one that waited in the frozen north. Whispers of a new power began to drift across the seas, carried on icy winds. There, atop the frozen throne, a presence stirred, patient, calculating, eternal. The whispers spoke of Arthas, the fallen prince, and the deathly crown that bound him to the will of the Lich King. The heroes who had braved the void beyond the dark portal would soon face a new kind of war. Not for conquest or cosmic balance, but for the very soul of life itself. The Burning Crusade had taught them the cost of power. Now they would learn the cost of redemption. As the last fell storms of Outland flickered and died, the portal between worlds remained, not as a symbol of invasion, but as a reminder. Beyond it lay infinite worlds, infinite battles, and infinite choices. And though this chapter had closed, the saga of Warcraft was far from over. The Burning Crusade had ended, but on the horizon, in the cold winds of Northrend, the next great legend was already waiting to rise.